In this video, I've got 50 Notion tips to supercharge your business. If you don't know me, my name's Sam. I'm a certified Notion consultant, and so I know a thing or two when it comes to adopting Notion for businesses. So what I'm going to walk you through now are some real strategic tips specifically for service-based businesses who are looking to run their business using Notion. I'll be talking about the systems, the structure, and the mindset that makes Notion work when you have a team. To make things easy to digest, I've broken these tips down into 7 categories. They are learn, structure, permissions, building, training, working, and supercharge. Before that though, I want to kick things off by giving you the most important tips at the very start of this video. If all you did was watch this section of the video before clicking off, you would get 50% of the value that I'm about to share. And that's because these are the most essential principles that you need to bear in mind when looking to adopt Notion for your team. Tip number 1 is don't switch for 3 months. Now my guess is if you're watching this video, you're probably just dabbling in Notion and trying to work out if it's right for you and your business. But here's the truth, even as someone who is an admitted Notion lover, the tool doesn't matter. Sure, Notion is great, and I'm a big advocate for service-based businesses using Notion to run their business. But no matter how many shiny features a particular tool has, or all the different things it says it can do, none of that matters if you haven't set up your systems properly. So tools don't matter, the systems that you build inside the tools matter. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you the challenge to stick with Notion for at least 3 months before you decide to move to another software. Time and time again, when I get on calls with clients, I can see what they're looking for is a software that is going to solve all of their problems. They start with Notion, and then they might jump over to ClickUp, and then they might jump to Monday. But ultimately, if you don't give yourself enough time to actually get your team inside of the tool, get using the tool, you're never going to be successful. So there's my challenge to you. Give it 3 months, actually put some time and effort into adopting Notion, and we'll move on to the next tip. Tip number 2 is to avoid what I like to call Notion procrastination. One of Notion's biggest pros is also one of its biggest cons, and that is its customization. Once you start using Notion, you'll realize that you can really customize anything you like, almost to the nth degree. And while that's great because it allows you to build out your specific processes into the tool, it also means that many founders and many team members fall into the Notion procrastination trap. That is simply that they waste more time building in Notion rather than getting their actual work done. Now later in this video, I'm going to give you some tips on actually building out your Notion workspace and how to do this as quickly and as effectively as possible. So whilst at the start you will want to dedicate some time to building your Notion, what I want you to bear in mind is throughout your journey with Notion, try not to let it procrastinate you from actually doing your real work, which is what it's meant to help you do in the first place. Tip number 3 is making a distinction between the Notion admin and the Notion user. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, following on from the previous tip, a problem I also find with teams adopting Notion is that the wider team also experience Notion procrastination, and they begin building out very specific dashboards or setups that they're going to use in either their department or even just specifically for their work. But what ends up happening is you have different silos of teams or team members who have very specific ways of using Notion, and then the overall workspace becomes messy and chaotic. So that's why I think everyone should make a distinction between who is going to be the Notion admin or admins, i.e. the people who are in charge of actually building inside of Notion, and who is going to be a Notion user, someone who just goes in the workspace to get work done and they're not building anything. The Notion admin might be you, the founder. It might also be someone else on your team who is one of your Notion champions, someone who knows the tool well. So it can be a couple people, but the main thing is that you have someone who has been identified as the person who is responsible for building up setups so that your rest of the team doesn't run away, wasting time building their own, or worse, making your workspace a complete mess because of the work they've done. Tip number 4 is that using Notion as a team is all about training, and more training. Everyone wants the most beautiful laid out dashboard, and I get that is important. But even if you have the most beautiful setup, if no one knows how to use it, it's completely pointless. And that's why at the start of this video, I want to embed into your head that training your team on using Notion is the #1 priority that you have if you want a successful adoption. We'll be talking about what successful training looks like, but again, all I want to remind you from this point is that it's all about training, training, and more training. So before you can start building out your business's perfect setup inside of Notion, of course, you're going to have to learn how to use and build in Notion. Because of its customization, the app can be slightly overwhelming. So I want to give you some tips on how to fast track your learning. Tip number 5 is to take the Notion Essentials course. Yes, I'm sorry, this is a plug from my own course, but I really do believe that it is the best training out there when it comes to learning how to use Notion for service-based businesses. As you can see, the course is made of 3 modules here and has a ton of lessons inside, and it's been purpose-built to be able to be completed within 1 day. The bulk of this course is in the Practicing Notion module, and the reason I called it that is because we have a dedicated lesson on one of the features inside of Notion. Then we asked you to go away and actually build something out in your own Notion workspace based on a task or a question we've given you. And then in the following lesson, we follow up on that and see if you did it correctly. I really believe this is the key to learning how to use Notion, is by learning by building. And so we have put this thought or this principle straight into the course. You can also use Notion Essentials as your go-to resource when you're trying to get the wider team to learn how to use Notion. Because they'll be able to complete it within a day, it's a nice low friction option to get them up to speed very quickly. Tip number 2 is to learn the advanced parts of Notion. On this YouTube channel, of course, I have a ton of videos about Notion and particularly some of its more advanced features. One video that might be helpful at this point is watching my build an agency system from scratch, where I walk through step by step how I would build an agency system so you can follow along. I'd also recommend taking a look at Thomas Frank Explains channel. He has an entire channel dedicated to Notion and particularly some of its more advanced features. Tip number 7 is to, again, make a distinction of who needs to learn what. And what I mean by this is, as we identified earlier, we'll have some Notion admin who are in charge of building, and then we'll have the Notion users who are just using the workspace. And so the Notion users can go ahead and use the Notion Essentials course and just learn the basics when it comes to Notion. And it's only the Notion admin who should be looking at the more advanced features and spending their time learning that. So it might just be yourself that is learning the advanced features, or if there's someone else in your team who's going to also be on your Notion admin team, they should also dedicate some time to it as well. Most people open Notion and just start building, but without the proper structure in place, that is a recipe for disaster. In this next set of tips, I want to show you what a good structure for a business inside of Notion actually looks like. That way you'll know what to build and how to build it. So tip number 8 is to understand the Notion hierarchy. Now, some people may disagree that there is a hierarchy in Notion because everything is so custom. But if we look at it at a fundamental level, you actually notice that there are 3 levels of hierarchy to any Notion workspace. So the first level of the hierarchy here is our team spaces. As you can see, we have a few that we're going to run through in a second, but as just one example, we have this delivery team space. The next level of the hierarchy then is databases. And as you can see, we have this clients projects database. And it has multiple different views, but this is the next level of that hierarchy. And the final level are the actual database pages that live within this database. So each row of this database represents a different client project, and this is actually being grouped by different companies. So Acme Co currently has 3 projects with us. And as an example, we have a web design project that we're doing with them, and we have all the information about this particular project inside of this database page. In some cases, you could also argue that there is a 4th level to this hierarchy, and that is that if we have any related databases within a database, so for example, we have a related task database and it is grouping only tasks that are to do with this particular web design project, then it lives here. And so we could argue that that is a fourth level to the hierarchy. Ultimately, just having this hierarchy in your head makes it a bit easier when you're thinking about the structure and organization of your workspace. Tip 9 is to use my 4 recommended team spaces. And as you can see, these are the general team space, which everyone would have access to. And then we have 3 team spaces for the overall 3 functions in any business. So we have growth, which is going to house things for marketing, so content, maybe ads you're running, and then for sales, so the deals or opportunities that you're trying to close. In the delivery team space, we're going to have anything to do with delivery. So for most people, this would just be client projects. And then finally, stabilization. This is anything that is going to help you actually run the business, the day-to-day maintenance of the business. So this can be things like hiring, this can be team management, and things like finances. When most people get into Notion, they typically make a dedicated team space for each of their departments. And so it's not always necessary to have a dedicated team space per department. The main thing that team spaces do are allow you to control access a bit easier. So you can see if I come to team space settings, I can say who has access to this growth team space. So of course, if you do have specific teams and you don't want them seeing other teams' work, you can create these separate team spaces. But I found just having these 4 team spaces is a nice way to group things and also keeps your sidebar to a minimum. Tip number 10 is to use my 3 recommended databases. When you're just starting out, it can seem overwhelming seeing everyone's setups that seem very complicated and vast. But you can actually get 90% of what you need done inside of Notion using just 3 databases. As you can see here on my main company dashboard, those 3 databases are a projects database, a task database, and a docs database. The tasks and the docs databases are related to the project database, and so we can essentially organize our tasks and our docs per project. Within this project database, you can manage multiple types of projects. You might have client projects, you might have your deals, you might have content projects, and then you're just sharing the different tasks and docs to do with those projects. This simple setup can get you quite far for a long time. And as we'll explain in the next tip, you'll only need to introduce more databases when you have particular use cases. So tip number 11 is knowing when to introduce new databases. As we spoke about in the previous tip, when you're just getting started, you might only need one projects database where you're going to group all of your different tasks and documents. But as you get more advanced, you might want to create a different project database for the different types of projects that you run. As you can see here in our example, we have a database for our project initiatives, the projects that we're actually doing each quarter to drive towards our goals. We have a separate one for our content, so the different types of YouTube videos, LinkedIn posts, newsletters that we're doing. We have one for our deals or our opportunities, clients we're trying to land. We have one for our clients, our active client projects. One for people we're looking to hire into the team, and then finally for our actual active team members. And for example, we might have someone named Sally, and we have all of the different tasks that Sally might need to do for us, or that we're doing to basically manage her on the team. The reason why we might start using separate databases for these types of projects is that it allows us to be a bit more specific about the properties that we have inside of those project databases. So as an example, inside the content projects database, filming the video I'm filming right now, you can see I have a status property that is very specific to content. So it's showing things like scripting, recording, editing. We have a publish date property. We have a video folder property that links to the actual video folder. A place to pop our thumbnails inside. And then when we jump over to a page inside of our deals database, the properties massively differ. So we have a status property that has different statuses. So this is the statuses we're going to go through as we're trying to land the client. So when we've booked a discovery call, when we've sent a proposal, when we're nurturing a client or a lead, I should say. We have information on the actual contact, who it is, what their email is, We also have some additional properties here about the company, the expected close date, the services, the expected deal amount. And so basically we have different properties for the different types of projects that if we were to put all in one database, it would get very overcrowded very quickly. So as a summary for these last two tips, when you're just getting started, you can use the basic database structure of having a projects, tasks, and docs database. But as you start using Notion more frequently and have specific use cases for your projects, you can introduce new project databases that have their own specific properties. This is how you can build a Notion workspace over time for exactly what you need. And it's also how you can know what databases you need to introduce by having this initial structure in mind. Tip number 12 is to use a deliverable and then task structure for your task database. So as an example, we have this web design project and we have all of the different tasks that need to get done. But as you can see, we're making use of Notion's subtask feature or sub items feature. And so for some of these tasks, they actually represent an overall deliverable that needs to be completed. So we have create website strategy that needs to be done by April 15th. But obviously creating the overall website strategy is something that is quite a big task and can't be completed just by one person in one sitting. And so we then break this task down by all of its individual subtasks that may be completed by multiple people. As another example, inside of this content creation project, we have a couple tasks, and then we also have two deliverables, which are the pieces of content we need to produce. So one is a blog post, and the due date for this overall deliverable now becomes the publish date. So on May 21st, we need to publish this blog post. And then again, using the sub items, we have all of the different tasks or subtasks that need to be completed and the date that they need to be completed on, so that we have enough time to actually get this thing done before the publish date. What's cool about having the setup in this way as well is we also have some separate views just for the deliverables. So we can create a deliverables calendar to see the YouTube video when that needs to go out, when the blog post is going to go out. We can also create a deliverables board so we can see what each stage of the overall deliverable is in. And then of course we can click into any of these deliverables and see the actual subtasks that need to get done. Having this simple deliverable and then task or subtask structure means that we're able to keep all the information about the work that's being done in this one overall task. And it also means that we are able to be very specific about creating simpler tasks that get done by one person on one day, rather than having a huge overall parent task of complete blog post that multiple people are doing and that we're not able to actually track the overall progress or status updates of that deliverable. Tip number 13 is to make use of Notion tabs. Before tabs, when we wanted to set up a project page like we've seen previously, we used to have to make use of linked databases. So you can see here, we have a linked database of our task database and of our docs database. And we're actually making use of a database template to achieve this that basically allows us to have this come in preloaded with all of the different filters. But there were two main issues with having this setup. The first is because these are just templates, they're not things that are universally applied. If I was to make an update to the master template, so for example, if I came in here and decided that I wanted another view inside of the task database for whatever reason, and whatever that view did, it wouldn't necessarily mean that all of the other templates that are currently active or that have been applied would automatically update. And so the rest of the client projects would be outdated with an old setup. The second issue is that this setup is a lot easier for the wider team to disrupt and destroy. So for example, it'd be very easy for someone to come in here and accidentally delete a view, or it might be that they add their own view that's something very specific to them that doesn't actually make sense in the context of the build, or they could even delete the overall view itself, and so we have that missing from this page. Notion tabs allows us to avoid both of these issues. So if I wanted to customize a layout for this particular setup, and let's say I just added another duplicate of the docs tab, and I apply this to all pages, now I have it both in this content creation setup, And I also now have it inside of this web design setup as well. So it's applied across all of my different client project databases. What's great as well is to edit any of the information. For example, here and here, I'm not able to move the columns. I'm not able to delete any of the views. If I need to do anything, I have to come to this customize layer option, which is just a little bit more friction for your team to actually start messing around with your setups. And so everything is just locked down and a bit more secure. Tip number 14 is to create a set of client project automations. Now you can create as many different database automations as you like in Notion, but again, just like my 3 recommended databases, these set of automations in your client project database are going to be the biggest impact in your business. So as you can see in my client database, if I come to the Thunderbolt icon, I can access all the automations, and I currently have 3 set up. But the main structure is that I have one for my overall general onboarding. And so whenever the status is set to planning and we have the services contains onboarding, all of my general onboarding for my client onboarding is sent to the task database and related to the client project. And then I also have a separate automation for each of the different service lines or offerings that I have. So for example, I have one for web design, which I can see all of the tasks being populated here. And also I have one for content creation with all of the tasks like so. So if I was to create a new client project, just as an example, I can add all the information in here. And then once I've added all that information, I can set this to planning. And as you can see inside of the example project, that's populated the 2 tasks that I need to do. I've got a dedicated video on how to set up these automations, so definitely check that out. But in this tip, I just wanted to show you that this is possible in Notion, and you'll most likely get the biggest impact by doing this for your client project database. Tip number 3 is to create my 3 recommended dashboards. A bit like when we spoke about the different databases that you can create, there is an unlimited amount of opportunities that you have to create different dashboards in your Notion workspace. But I see that there are only 3 fundamental dashboards that you need to get your work done. The first dashboard is your business OS. And this is essentially where you store all of your company information, documentation, goals, all in one spot. So you can see here, we have things like a wiki, we have your meetings, we have roles, services, KPIs. So all of this information can live in one page, which acts as your operating system. The second dashboard, which we've already seen, is the everything page or your business dashboard. And so we have a link to all of the information that you might want to see all in one spot for easy navigation. So for example, we have the information from the business OS that we can look through here. We also have all of the different projects that we've already seen that are compiled together here in a nice clickable linked view. We also have the task database and seeing all the different tasks from across the workspace in one view. We have the docs database and we have all the different docs databases put together. And then finally, we have the timesheets database. So this one dashboard allows you to see everything from a bird's eye view. And then the final dashboard, and something most people miss out, is giving everyone in your team a My Home dashboard that lives in their private section. So you can see this is My Home, and these are just showing me all of the tasks from the task database that have been assigned to me. So I can see the things to do. I can see anything that is due today. I can see this on a calendar view, and I can see the things that have been done. I can also customize these different views to the way I like to see things. And so now each person has just one spot they can go to see the things they need to get done. When I've shown people the My Home page in the past, they often ask me why I don't use Notion's native homepage, which inside of it has this My Tasks view, which you can actually open into a full page, and does something very similar where it shows you all the tasks that just you have been assigned in one spot. But there are a couple of reasons why I don't like to use the home page. First of all, it's not available on Notion's mobile app. So if you're out and about doing work, you won't be able to quickly reference it. Secondly, you are only limited to this one view. So I've only got this My Task view. I can't create multiple views like I do have in my home page, which has a today view, a calendar view, and as many different views as I would like to create. You're also limited by the number of properties you're allowed to show, because the idea of the My Tasks view is it actually can congregate multiple tasks from different task database. Now with the setup that I recommend, you only have one central task database. So this isn't necessarily a helpful thing. And so you can see from the properties, I'm only able to bring in the due date, the status, and the assignee. Whereas on the My Home page, I can bring in information about the start and stop points. If I really wanted to, I could bring in the SOP, so the related SOP, or any other properties that I like to see. Tip number 16 is to create a version of recurring tasks in Notion. Now, at the moment, Notion doesn't have a native solution to having recurring tasks inside of their databases, but I have a dedicated video that you can check out that shows you how to create recurring tasks using database automations. As an example, in our task database, we have this recurring view and we have these recurring properties. So to submit the tax report, we want this to happen once a year. And so we can say the due date is today and that the next due date will be this time next year. And using a database automation, once I mark this off as complete, like so, the database automation will trigger. And now you can see that a new task has been created, again, to submit the tax report. And now it's been set to this time next year. And then the next due date is this time in 2 years. And so now we have this recurring task feature built into Notion. Having recurring tasks is really important because it's the one thing that will actually help your team to create routines and rituals in your business for the day-to-day running of your operations. Tip number 17 is to store all of your databases in a back-end page. In our business OS, you can see over here, we have this back-end page. And within this page, we have all of the different databases that we are using in one spot. Having all our databases in one page, first of all, makes it a lot easier to manage access to the different databases, as well as just knowing which databases are currently inside this workspace. But second of all, it allows us to create these types of dashboards without having the clutter of having multiple databases on the page or having to store them underneath the page. So for example, in the spot where we had our projects and they're all congregated into this simple view, we're only able to do that because the original databases are tucked away safely elsewhere. Tip number 18 is to include a nav bar at the top of each of your main pages. So as you can see on each of our different pages, we have this nav bar here, we have it here, we have it in this everything page. If I go over to the deals page, we'll have it here as well. And within each of these nav bars, we have on the left-hand side some quick action buttons, and then on the right-hand side, some quick links. The purpose of this nav bar is to make using Notion easier for your team so that they can capture things like tasks nice and quickly using this button, and they can navigate around the workspace using the quick links here and jump to pages like so. Making using the workspace as frictionless as possible is going to be the thing that is actually going to encourage your team to adopt Notion. When it comes to using Notion as a team, permissions is one of, if not the most important aspect to a workspace. You want your team to have access to what they need and not have access to things you want to keep hidden. So let's dive into some tips that make divvying out permissions a little bit easier. Tip 19 is to make use of groups. When you come to Notion settings and to the members section here, they have a tab called groups. And what this does is it basically allows you to group members of your workspace together into different categories. So as you can see, for example, I have this growth group, and within this particular group, I have myself, John, and Kelly that make it up. What this then allows you to do is if I wanted to share this web design project with those group of people, instead of having to invite them all on an individual basis, I can just search for that growth group from earlier, check them, give them full access, and then invite them to this page. Now, although that saves some time, the biggest time saver with using groups is it also allows you to decide what the permissions are to your workspace ahead of time. So when you have someone join your team for the first time, you can invite them to that group, and then they're going to get access to all of the different databases and pages that you've already decided that group should have access to. As you can see for my groups, I've used the different main functions that we had for our team spaces. So one for growth, one for delivery, and one for stabilization. Then I've also made a fourth group for Notion admin, the people that should have access to absolutely everything in your workspace, as they are the ones in charge of managing it. Tip 20 is to use team spaces to divvy out permissions. So now we have our groups, we can come to, for example, the growth team space, go to team space settings, and then within the members section here, instead of inviting individual members, we can say that we want anyone in the growth team space to be present in this team space. And so now forever on, if I add someone to the growth group, they're also going to be invited to the growth team space. Tip 21 is to use can edit content access. Now this access level is specific to the databases. So for example, if I was to go to our task database, you can see if I come to share, and I'll just use myself as an example, one of the options I have here that I don't have on just simple pages is can edit content. And as it says, it allows people to edit the content, but it doesn't allow them to edit the database's views or structure. So as an example, if someone had this access level, they wouldn't be able to come to this start property and choose to delete it, or choose to edit the automation or change the type to something else. And so my suggestion to you is to have can edit content for anyone who is a Notion user and apply it to all of the different databases that you have in your back end page. This is going to avoid people from deleting database properties that you have created, but it's also going to enforce the principle of not allowing Notion users to build in Notion. With this access level, they're not going to be able to create new properties in your databases. And again, this can be really helpful because I've always seen that in bigger teams, when you allow them to create properties, new properties crop up willy-nilly and your workspace becomes chaotic. So now you've set up your groups, you've applied your permissions to your team spaces, and you've also given all your database can edit content access. Tip 22 is now to apply access at the database level. So although you may have given someone access to the growth team space, that doesn't necessarily mean they have access to the databases that live within the pages themselves. And that's because, again, all of the pages currently live within the back end page. So you'll want to come to wherever your deals databases are, or any of the databases that live in that team space, and just make sure that you have given that group that access level. So I'd come to this deal projects and make sure I have given growth access to this database. Now we compare this tip with the previous tip and actually make sure that we give each of the groups can edit content access. And now this also means that whenever you invite someone with that group, not only are they getting access to the right team space and they're getting access to the right database, they're also getting access to that database just with can edit content access. By the way, if you're getting value from this video, please do give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more. Thanks very much. All right, now that you've got the structure, it's time for the fun bit and to start building your Notion workspace. This section is all about speed. We're going to talk about how you can build your workspace as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And with that in mind, tip 23 is to announce that you're building your Notion workspace to your wider team. If you've committed yourself to using Notion and you intend to have your team join you, the most important thing is to get buy-in from your team as early as possible. Whether they admit it or not, everyone hates change. And so if you just throw your team into Notion the day that it's ready without any initial warning, it's likely that they're going to feel overwhelmed and potentially reject it. So now is a great opportunity to announce to the team that you are going to be using Notion and to get them ready and even excited to be in the workspace. Tip 24 is to choose the right plan for your business. Now, if you haven't already signed up for a plan with Notion, you can use the link down below in the description. And in doing so, I'll get a bit of kickback. So I really do appreciate that. But you want to come to this website, which is going to explain exactly what you get with each of the different plans. As you can see at the time of recording this, Notion recommends their business plan here. But I've found for most small teams, a plus plan is all you really need. I'd say the two biggest differences between the plus plan and the business plan is, first of all, with the plus plan, you get a limited number of guests. You get 100 guests, which means when you invite someone to a single page and you don't pay for their membership, And on the business plan, you get 250 guests. So you get 150 more guests. Most of the time, you'll be using this guest feature when you're inviting contractors that aren't full-time team members. And in most cases, you don't have more than 100 guests that you need. Another use case you might be using this is if you're working with clients and you're wanting to make a client portal natively inside of Notion. But again, at any given time, you don't normally have more than 100 clients. The second difference between these two plans, again, at the time of recording this, is that with the business plan, you're going to be getting Notion AI included, whereas with the Plus plan, it's not included. And so with Notion AI, you're going to be able to use the chat feature as well as Notion's new AI meetings recorder. Of course, there are a few more additional features that Notion have decided to lock behind this business plan. So you'll want to take a look at the website linked down below in the description to double check what's right for your team. Tip 25 is to only build what's needed. If you're planning to build your Notion workspace on your own, i.e. you're not going to be using a Notion template or hiring a Notion consultant, then I'd urge you to only build things as you need them. It can be easy to get carried away and think of all the different use cases and contexts you might need something in Notion, but unless you're actually going to be using it every single day, don't bother building it right now. The reason for this is that you want your team to actually use what you build, and so the less you give them, the less overwhelm they have, and the more likely they are to pick it up. Once you're all inside of Notion and using it every single day, sure, if you find another context that would be helpful to have, build it. Contrary to that though, tip 26 is if you're looking for a template, I'm going to again plug one of my own products, which is Agency HQ. This is the template that I designed specifically for service-based businesses and has been used and trusted by over 500 different businesses. It gives you an entirely pre-built setup with a way to manage your clients, your tasks, your content, your leads, and even your team in terms of hiring and management. In fact, it's the setup that you've seen parts of inside of this very video. Now, with that being said, I still encourage you to only use what you need instead of only building what you need. And in fact, inside of the Agency HQ course, we talk about this very topic, and I encourage all of my customers to tuck away the pages they're not going to use right now and only use a small number of them to begin with. That being said, if you do want to build your workspace yourself, tip 27 is to use Notion's built-in templates to get you started. As we spoke about earlier in the video, when you're getting started, I believe there's only 3 main databases that you need. That was the projects, tasks, and docs database. And using Notion's built-in templates, we can produce these really quickly for ourselves. So if I come down to templates here, and in the search, I'm just going to search for projects and tasks. And it's this one here, and all I have to do is click add again, and I'm going to add it to my private section. And now just with a click of a button, I have a projects and tasks set up here inside of this page. And most importantly, if I come to my projects, I can see that they have actually been related to my tasks. And so I have that initial level of hierarchy where I can group things within projects. If I come to templates again, I can also search for a docs database. I can grab this one here. I can decide to add it to my workspace in the private section. And now I have a doc setup ready to go. The only thing I would need to do for this particular one is add a new property and relate it to the projects database using a two-way relation. And now I have everything connected together with those 3 databases. Now, of course, you'll probably want to go through these databases and customize some of the properties and the views and the overall setup, but this gives you a great jumping off point to get things done quickly. I've got a dedicated video where I walk through step by step how I would make this setup using these Notion native templates, which you can check out as well. Tip 28 is to make use of the master views of databases. So what exactly do I mean by this? Well, earlier in the video, I spoke about how you might like to put all of your databases in a backend page, as it makes it a little bit easier to manage the databases themselves. With that in mind then, when you're wanting to build out a dashboard, so for example, if I wanted to create another everything company dashboard, I'm going to be making use of linked views of databases. So for example, if I wanted to have a section for the projects database, I'm going to do the / command and type out linked, get a linked view of the database, and then I'm going to find my projects database. Now, what's interesting is that when I go to create a new view of this database, I have the views on the projects database from the original database. So I can basically choose from the original database what views I want. These are called the master views, and I can click them to create them. But if I didn't have any of those master views, or if they weren't particularly useful for me, when I come to create a new linked view as I'm building out different dashboards, then I'll have to create a new table view, and I'll have to basically go through the process of building that view from scratch. And so though your databases are tucked away in this back end page, make sure that you still make these master views that you're probably going to be using again and again as you're building, so that you can speed up your building time and only build them once. And tip 29 is to use database load limits. So when we are creating these master views, something that we want to remember to do is come to the settings and come to layout. And then in this load limit, we want to make sure that we give it a load limit of something around 25 to 50. If we have a load limit of 100, this basically means that your responsiveness inside of Notion will slow down as there's more pages for the workspace to load. And just having a smaller load limit makes things load a lot quicker. So now it's finally time for training, and more training. As you'll soon find out, building your Notion workspace is actually the easy part. Getting your team to use it is what is truly difficult. So let's cover some tips and tricks when it comes to bringing your team into Notion. So tip 30 is to have a start here page. And as you can see in my own workspace, the very first page that a new member would land on is our business OS. And at the very top of this page, there's a welcome message that says, "Welcome, please go to start here to get started." And when they click through to this page, they have a video which is basically welcoming them to the workspace and what they could expect. And then they also have this management project, which I'll talk about in the following tip. But the main thing here is having an infrastructure for whenever someone joins your Notion workspace, they have an immediate port of call of what they should do first. So we remove that sense of overwhelm and they actually have something to welcome them into the workspace. Tip 31 then is to have a onboarding checklist for your employee to either onboard them generally into your business, but also to onboard them onto the Notion workspace. And again, when we come over to our start here page, you can see we have that welcome video. And then the second thing we have is a management project. This is essentially one of our project types, and it is where we house all of the different tasks and information that we need to help manage a person. So you can see I have myself here, and when I open it up, I have a task list that acts as a kind of onboarding checklist, and it can have onboarding items for if you actually have someone joining your team for the first time. So for example, having a one-to-one with the manager. But what you can also have is onboarding items for being onboarded onto Notion. So as an example, we have complete the Notion Essentials course. We can see when we need to do it, who needs to do it, and also any details or wiki items. So for this example, it's saying, go to the Workflow Lab membership site, log in using your company email, and then you can go through the course. We also have, for example, watch the Agency HQ overview, which is the overview of the overall template. And then we have a link to the wiki item, which we can click through and watch the video. Your onboarding checklist doesn't necessarily have to be as fancy as the one we have inside the Agency HQ template. The main thing is that you have one place that new members to the workspace can go to, where they can be welcomed into the workspace and also know what the very next step they need to take is. So when your team is going through their onboarding checklist, tip 32 is to have a resource that is going to act as a beginner course to Notion. Again, I'm going to plug Notion Essentials here because that's exactly what it's been designed to do. But the most important thing is that you have at least one resource that is your go-to resource for training your team with Notion. Without your team getting the fundamentals of Notion down, they're never going to feel confident enough to become a productive participant in your workspace. And so this step or this tip is crucial. Tip 33 is to create page guides for each of the major pages inside your Notion workspace. So we already saw an example of this inside our onboarding checklist. We have a watch the Agency HQ overview. And then when we come to the wiki item and click through it, you can see essentially this is a SOP or a reference guide in our wiki database. And it's a video that gives an overview of the overall workspace. But we don't just put these inside of the onboarding checklist. We actually have one of these guides at the top of page of every one of our major pages. So you can see in our business OS, when we open up that nav bar we created, we have a button that says page guide. And when we open it, it's going to open up a page guide for this particular page with the video. If I come to the content page and I open up this nav bar, you'll see I've got a page guide. And again, it's that video dedicated to this particular page and how to use it. All of these guides actually live inside of our wiki database here. But the most important thing is that we've made sure that they actually also can be referenced from within the page themselves using this nav bar. So whenever someone is walking around or navigating around your workspace, if they feel confused at all they have to do is come to the page guide here, nice and easily, and remind themselves of how to use the page. In the same light, tip 34, 35, and 36 is to make use of Notion's view descriptions, property descriptions, and select option descriptions. So when you're building out your workspace, Notion has the option to create these different types of descriptions or documentation built into your design. So for example, here on our clients page, in our view at the top here, you can see we have by company, and then underneath it, it says active client projects grouped by company. And the way we create this is when we're creating the view, we can come to the view settings, we can come to this little information icon, and it's going to allow us to add as much information as we like. On the properties themselves, we can also do this. So if we come to this status property and come to the icon, you'll see it says track the status of this client project. Some statuses trigger automations, hover over each option to see what it does. And again, the way we did this is right clicking, coming to the information icon and adding the information here. And then finally, within the statuses themselves, you can see if I come to planning, I can see that this information tag says, use this status to trigger any of the database automations. And again, the way I did this was by coming to edit property, and then within the actual status itself, I can choose this to create the information. All of these last 4 tips is about making it as frictionless and easy as possible for your team to use and understand your workspace, so that while they're actually in the context of whatever they're doing, they know close by there's some more additional information or lessons about how to use the thing. And tip 37 is to create a Notion help center. Again, in our business OS, in the resources section, next to the start here page, we also have a Notion help page. And basically inside this page, we congregate all of the information about using Notion in one spot, so that if someone feels like they want to learn everything at once, or if they can't find exactly where that guide came from, they can come to this spot and know it's here. At the top, we have a link to the Notion Essentials course, so they can go ahead and take that. And then below we have a linked view of the wikis database, but we're filtering just the things that have Notion as a software attached. So of course, this is going to show us all the different guides we have. For example, the team page guide with the video to it here. But what we also have is any other SOPs or processes that use Notion that might not specifically be a guide that we've created, also being shown here. So for example, we have a client onboarding automation that makes use of Notion that we've documented. So if we want to remind ourselves how that's being used, we could come here and open that up as well. Again, the focus is making this as easy and even enjoyable for your team to use, so they never feel lost when they're using your workspace. So you've built your Notion workspace, you've got your team trained and ready. Now let's talk about the day-to-day work. These next set of tips are dedicated to the habits that you and your team should try to form to make working inside of Notion easy and enjoyable. So tip 38 is to calibrate your personal settings. You can do that by coming to your sidebar and clicking settings. And then from here, the first thing that you want to make sure you do and your team does is come to account and upload a photo. And then also make sure that the preferred name is correct, as during the signing up option, sometimes you'll find that your name might say something like this. So just basically renaming it to something that's a bit more accurate. The reason this is important is that very photo and name is used in the assignee property or the person property. So for example, if we come to the task database, you can see that I have been assigned Sam Bird with my correct photo, these tasks, and John Smith has been assigned these. And so basically having this be accurate and a proper representation of who the person is just makes it easier when people are looking through who owns what. The second thing you might like to do is come to the preferences and under appearances, choosing whether you want to have Notion in light or have it in dark mode, which looks something like this. or you can even put it to system settings, which will basically make it light or dark depending on the time of day. There are a few more settings you may want to tweak, but the last and most important one is your notifications. I recommend that first of all, everyone toggles off page updates and workspace digests in the email notification section. I found when you have them on, you just get a herd of emails that are not necessary. And so to avoid that, you can toggle these off. And as well, if you're inside of Notion every day anyway, might also want to toggle off activity in your workspace because you'll be seeing these notifications in your inbox. Tip 39 is to have a start of the day routine inside of Notion. This is something we teach inside of the Notion Essentials course, but here's part of that routine. So for example, when you first land inside of Notion, the first thing you should do is come to your inbox and check your inbox. Now, depending on the notification, you'll do different actions based on them. So for example, the first one I have here is a notification from my editor, and he's basically just saying that he's glad that the video did well. So there's nothing I really need to do. I might reply with a quick thumbs up, but I can leave this notification, and all I want to do is basically archive this from my inbox. The second notification I have here is from my project manager and my thumbnail designer. And basically I've had some thumbnails that have been sent through, and they're both asking me for my approval. This is something I can do fairly quickly within 2 minutes or less. So I may just give my comments saying that I like it, it's approved. I can comment that off, and then again, I can come to my inbox and I would archive this so it's cleared. And then the final notification I have again is from my editor, and they found something in my script where they would like me to find some photos or some B-roll that they need. Now this is actually a longer task. It's going to take me 2 minutes, more than 2 minutes to create this. And so instead of keeping this in my inbox, what I'm going to do is come to my homepage. And then within my today view, I'm going to drop a task in here, which is going to say, create visuals for video editor. And then once I've done that, I can also come back up to my inbox and clear it away, because I now know I have that task in my task database. Once I've cleared my inbox, the second thing I'm going to do is come over to my homepage and check through the tasks that I have. So the first thing I like to do is basically look at all of the tasks that I have been assigned, even the tasks that I might have coming up in the future, and basically check if there's anything that I'm being blocked on by someone else, so I can get them to either get that done for me before I actually have to get the task done. So for example, on the 15th of August, I have host onboarding call, but perhaps I haven't had the slides sent to me by my project manager. So I could say that to my project manager, please send the slides for this, and comment that on the task, and hopefully that will be cleared before the time I actually have to do the task. The second thing I'm going to do is come to my today view, and inside here I have a grouping which basically shows the things that are due today and anything that I might be late on. And so what I might like to do on here is, if I have something that's late that someone else is depending on for me, so I'm blocking them, I might come in here and just add a comment inside of this page body and explain why this task is late and when I intend to get it done. So here again, I might say to Rachel, I couldn't get these done, but it's going to prioritize today. So now Rachel's got an update about that. And then the final thing I'm going to do is look at my today view, the tasks that are actually due today, and just make sure I have enough time to get all of them done. If I don't have enough time, again, I'm going to leave a comment for anyone that might need updates on that, just to basically give them an update that I'm not gonna be able to get this done today, but I'll be doing it tomorrow or the following day. Tip 40 is to communicate where the work gets done. And you've already seen me do this as I was going through my start of the day ritual. But the idea is to get into the habit of using Notion's chat feature to comment on things inside of the tasks, projects, or docs where the information actually lives. When I often recommend this, I get some pushback by people. But let me walk you through the two different scenarios at hand. Scenario one is shooting a message in Slack, maybe saying something like, how we getting on with projects XYZ. Although this is quick for the sender to do, for the recipient, it's really slow. First of all, they may have to go back over to Notion and look at the projects to get context for themselves. Then over on Slack, they're going to have to draw out all of that context in a long message. And finally, they may have to give continual updates as things change within the project itself. Scenario 2 is if that sender first went into Notion and took the time to find the information. So for example, going to the project inside of Notion and then dropping that comment. What that then does is for the recipient, they have all of the context there ready for them. And so they don't have to spell it out. They can just give direct reply. This is definitely the tip that is the hardest to implement in your team. But trust me when I say, if you can get your team to start communicating inside of Notion where the work gets done, it's going to speed up everything. Tip 41 is to have the rule that there can only be one assignee per task. As you can see throughout our task database, we only ever have one person being assigned to one task. And the reason for this is simple. If more than one person owns a task, no one has ownership over that task. So by breaking down your tasks into things that need to be completed by one person, and preferably in one sitting, it means that they have total ownership over what needs to get done. If you like, you can even be very strict about this and come to the property itself, and within the limit, you can set the limit to one person, so not even two people can be added just by design. So now let's jump into some tips that's going to make working inside of Notion a bit more efficient. And tip number 42 is to use the / command. So as you might know already, whenever you want to create something within a page, whether it's formatting or building, you can use the / command for pretty much everything that you need to do. So for example, if I wanted to create a title right now, I could come down to heading 1, and then I've now got a new heading that I need nice and quickly. But if you want to become even more efficient inside of Notion, you can start to use some of the shortcuts with the / command. So instead of doing / and then pointing down to or clicking down to heading 1, I could actually do a / and then H1. And now I've got my heading, I just press enter, and now I've got a new heading already. If I wanted to make a simple to-do list, I could do / start spelling out to, and that's all I have to write, hit enter, and now I've got a to-do list. Or if I wanted a toggle list, I could do TO and then G, and now I've got a toggle list, and I can create this toggle list here. So try to get in the habit of not only using the / command, but also using the shortcuts with it to quickly start formatting your pages. Tip 43 is to use the ultimate navigation shortcut, which is the enter button and the shift back or forward button. So this becomes particularly useful when you're interacting with databases. So for example, when I open up this management project, you'll see it opens up in a side peek. But if I want this to be a full page, I can do command return, and that's going to open up this page in a full page for me nice and quickly. Now, as we've got our databases tucked within our back end page, if I was to use the breadcrumbs, it's actually going to send me back to the original database, which lives within the back end page, which isn't particularly useful. So instead of that, whenever I come into a page, and again, I'm going to do command enter. If I want to come back out of that page, I can do command back bracket, and now that's going to shoot me back. It's essentially like pressing the back option here. So when I'm navigating around Notion, I can do command enter. Let's say that there was a task here and I come into this task and I can do command enter. And now let's say I want to go all the way back to the original client page. I can do command back bracket, and then again, command back bracket, and now I'm back at the original page. And command bracket again, and now I'm back to the original client's page. And what I can even do here is if I want to close out this window, instead of doing command back bracket, I can also hit escape, and now I'm back at the client dashboard. Tip number 44 is to use the bulk edits feature when you need to edit multiple entries within a database. So as an example, in my homepage, let's say I've gone through all of my work for the day, but I wasn't actually actively checking things off as they were done, but I have done all of these tasks within this today grouping. What I can do is hover my mouse along the left of the database till I see this checkbox, and I can either choose multiple entries like so, or I can choose all of them at once. And then using this little menu bar at the top, I can either choose the statuses and set this to done. If I wanted to find all of the properties, I could do these 3 dots, come to edit property and see all the different properties. But for now, let's just say I want to check these off as done. I could do it like so in one quick, easy action. Tip number 45 is to have a end of the day routine as well. So this is going to be the exact same as the start of the day ritual, but we're just going to do it in reverse. So to begin with, we're going to be in the My homepage, and I've already done some of this, but the first thing you want to do is basically check off any tasks that you've done. Then for any of the tasks that you haven't completed that you said you would get done today, again, you're going to come inside of the page and just comment in the page body to anyone that needs to know that it's overdue and when you expect to get it done. We're also going to check our overall task list. And again, if there's any tasks in here that we feel we're being blocked on or that we may need additional support on before the day comes, we can leave a comment in here as well. And then finally, we're going to come to our inbox and clear it out the exact same way, checking if there's anything that needs to be done right now, if it's something that we can just clear instantaneously, or if it's something that we need to create a task for ourselves to do in the future. All right, now that your system is up and running and you're using it day to day, let's go one step further. This section is all about how to supercharge your use of Notion using tools and features that go beyond the basics. So tip number 46 is to use Notion Calendar. And the main reason for this is Notion now has an amazing integration with the Notion Calendar, which allows you to have information from your databases inside of your calendars. So as you can see here underneath my Sandbird workspace, I have my tasks database connected and my content projects database connected. And so what I can see here on my actual calendar amongst my other events and calls is the tasks that I need to get done. For example, film this YouTube video. And I also have things like my content projects, so I can see what YouTube videos are coming out on what days. What's also great is if you're into time blocking, if you come to a week view or a today view, you can actually take the tasks that have a due date of today and drag them down onto your calendar. So right now I'm filming my YouTube video and it's going to take me probably another hour. And so I can actually go through this. And then once I'm done, I can actually click on the event itself or the database itself and select this property and say that this has been completed for today. Tip 47 is to use third-party automations like Make and Zapier. You'll only want to use this when you have a particular process that you're looking to automate, but Notion is really good with its API to connect to make this run. So here's a very simple example of this, but I have inside of Make an automation that checks for when a Notion database item in my content projects database is set to thumbnail. And when it is, it's going to create a new Google folder in my Google Drive. And then it's going to link the URL to that folder into a property inside of the project database page that basically makes that folder easily available for my editor and thumbnail designer. So as you can see for this video I'm currently recording, I have the video folder, and then if I click this link here, it's going to actually take me to the folder inside of Google Drive with the different thumbnails and then eventually the footage and the audio. Tip 48 is to use Notion's web clipper. And what this small Chrome extension does, as you can see, is it allows you to take information from the web and basically save it into any database of your choosing. Inside of a business context, this can be particularly helpful if one of your team finds a resource online, whether that's something that's going to teach others how to do something, or maybe a swipe file of interesting designs. And then they can use the web clipper to basically save the page. It's going to create a database page, for example, in your docs database. It's going to link to the URL in your URL property. And then in some cases, you can actually take the page content from the website and basically get that to go inside the page itself as well. Tip number 49 is to join Notion's status website as well as their email subscription. Basically what this website is a live up-to-date report on any issues or bugs that Notion is experiencing. Most of the time Notion's great with bugs, but sometimes you will experience some in your own workspace, and so it's great to be able to come to this website and see if that is a bug that they are aware of, or if it's something that might be more specific to your workspace. If you are the Notion admin, it's helpful to be able to show this to your team and say, oh, it looks like this is a bug that's currently being experienced, but I can see from the report that they're currently working on it and hopefully it will be solved by the end of the day. And finally, tip 50 is to join the amazing Notion community online. That's whether it's on things like Reddit, on X, on LinkedIn, or if you really get into things, you might consider joining one of Notion's own communities like I am, which is things like the Notion Ambassador community. Out of all of the different SaaS products online, at this point, without argument, that Notion has one of the best communities that you can be a part of. So if you're enjoying Notion and you want to stay ahead of all the different updates and also learn from others, I strongly recommend joining the community. It's something that I've done and I've never regretted it. So now you've got 50 ways to supercharge your Notion workspace for your business. But if you're wondering how to use all of these tips to put together a complete Notion workspace, you should check out this video here. It's a walkthrough video of my ultimate Notion setup for service-based businesses. And again, it's the exact setup that I've been showing you in this video. Other than that, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.